And joining me straight from Canberra is former Deputy Prime Minister of Australia, Michael Mccormack. He's also the Shadow Minister for International Development in the Pacific. Michael, really appreciate your time. The Australian Prime Minister has been in India for the G20 Summit, and he has said that this G20 Summit, hosted by Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has been successful. What is the larger sense among Australians? How do they see India's G20 presidency?
Well, I agree totally with Prime Minister Anthony Albanese. And of course, when Australia goes onto the international stage, such as at G20, the nation is as one. And we absolutely need G20 to be a success. We absolutely need the Prime Minister to give Australia's view of how important the Pacific is at the moment, how important the theme for the G20, one Earth, one family, one future. Those things are very, very important as we work towards a more sustainable future. Food security is so important, and the Prime Minister knows this well. I was speaking to my Foreign Affairs spokesperson for the coalition side of the Australian Parliament, Senator Simon Birmingham, about how important G20 was. And we understand all of the things that have been discussed. We know that India has, of course, held the presidency for this period now and has put on a very successful G20. So well done to Prime Minister Narendra Modi, and we wish all of the participants very well as they return to their countries and then put in place the very, very important policies that have been determined and decided at this most prestigious event.
And Michael, the fact is, how is Australia viewing particularly the expansion of G20 with the inclusion of African Union?
Well, I was in Africa not that long ago and visited Kenya, and it's tough in the Horn of Africa at the moment. They've had 5 failed rainy seasons. Their supply chains have been very much disrupted by the war in Ukraine, the illegal invasion of Ukraine by Russia. But look, Africa has unlimited potential. We know that. We know that we all must, as a world, come together to do what we can for developing nations within Africa. But to expand it to Africa is so important. We need to lift those countries up to standards whereby they do have food security, standards by which they are participating in such an important global forum, such as G20, standing on their own feet in the future and really participating. And this is important, and this is on India's watch. So well done again.
Food, fuel, fertilizer, the 3 Fs are also the big takeaway in terms of food security, fuel security, and fertilizer security. How important is it to have this kind of comprehensive economic cooperation between various countries of the world, and that should be reflected by a body or an institution such as G20?
I think it goes beyond important. It's actually critical. Food security is the biggest challenge that we have, along with many others, of course, but making sure we get the world's population fed and fed sustainably, and making sure that we have that food security in the future. Of course, we do have climate interruptions. We do have weather events which take such a toll on humanity, such a toll on those agricultural growing regions. I come from one of the biggest food bowls in all of Australia, that being the Riverina. And we want to make sure that going forward that we make every available use of every drop of water, that we still have the fertiliser so that we can grow sustainable crops, and that we have the potential to grow even more going forward. This is so important. And of course, we get animal welfare issues in there as well. And of course, Australia has a very good record in this regard. And we will continue to make sure that when we are on the world stage, that everybody knows that we need to continue to grow clean, green, fresh food, not just Australia, but all the nations. And whatever we can do to help in that regard, we will.
And before embarking on his visit to New Delhi, Anthony Albanese, the Prime Minister, has said that Australia is watching keenly the manoeuvres and the big moves of the Indian Prime Minister. Only recently, Prime Minister Narendra Modi in the month of May, to be specific, was on a three-nation visit when he also visited Australia. And the emphasis was on strengthening relationship between the two nations.
Oh, absolutely. And again, even though I'm from the opposite side of politics to the Prime Minister Albanese, I very much agree with him. And Modi's visit was very successful in Australia. We have a huge Indian diaspora here. And I know I speak to my Jagvinder Singh Virk very regularly, almost on a daily basis, about just how important it is to have these relationships with India, to improve access to trade, to ensure that there are no tariffs, to ensure that we can have that two-way trade. We've got a lot that India needs. India has a lot that we need. And to continue those very, very friendly relations everywhere except the cricket pitch is so important. And let me tell you, when India does come for cricket visits, their crowd numbers always outnumber ours almost at such places as the Melbourne and Sydney cricket grounds.
So, since you're using the cricket analogy, let me ask you one last question about the Biofuel Alliance. A massive alliance involving many countries, and many of them are not even part of G20. Many are not even invitee nations. This Biofuel Alliance is very strategic in nature, but at the same time very futuristic. Would you say that this is almost hitting a ball out of the park?
It is, and we need to do that because we need to look to the future. All too often, we've been stagnated and just treading water. We need to be absolutely looking ahead to the future. Of course, countries signing up to net zero by 2050. We need to make sure that everything in that regard doesn't impede our trade, doesn't impede our ability to grow food, and doesn't impede our ability to have cheap, affordable, reliable power. Now, we get those things ticked off. We can do all sorts of things in the biofuel space, indeed even converting waste, which is one of the biggest challenges of our time. That's the waste that we have everyday litter, converted into energy, converted into biofuels and biomass. So important. I'm glad that these things were touched upon at G20. I know that there was international taxation. I know that there were things such as cybersecurity. They're all very important issues. That's what G20 is for, and I'm so glad that Australia was able to participate, and so great that India's presidency of G20 has been so successful.